Hi, babe.
Hi. Whew. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. How are you feeling?
Okay, well, we had a hell of a night.
We did.
And
It's been weeks.
weeks.
Yeah, we're currently dealing with a little bit of a sleep regression, us and our child. But we have plenty of time to get into all of that. Hey, y'all, my name is Nico Tortorella.
And I am Bethany C. Meyers.
And this is
Full of Shift.
We're really doing it.
We are.
We're starting a podcast.
Yes.
This is our first episode.
We are definitely starting a podcast, and this is our first episode.
How does it feel?
I'm excited.
Me too.
mean,
it's weird that we haven't really done this yet.
Yeah, because we have a podcast episode that we did together, and your old podcast that is phenomenal.
The
I'll
Love
say.
Bomb. Yeah,
Mhm.
we'll get into some of the Love Bomb today. But yeah, that was I think it was the last time we were in a podcast studio together. Actually, well, we've done some podcasts together.
Yeah. Chelsea Handler.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right.
That one.
Do you feel like we need to explain some of this podcast to people? Like give a little, top tier headlines of this is Full of Shift, where we will uncover family dynamics, parenthood, and partnership. All that good shit.
Sure, babe.
Do we need more than that?
No.
No?
I mean, I always feel like edit down, and you always feel like edit up.
More. I love a list, just like a ramble.
Yes.
I do feel like we need to preface this specific episode first, though. We have a lot of notes on our table today, which is like strange for us. I don't feel like either one of us are really note takers. I do shit on my phone, but printing out notes is not necessarily something that you will see in future episodes.
Right.
But for this specific episode, we're having a little bit more of a sensitive conversation, and we just want to make sure that we hit it with love and with care. Yeah.
Well, we're having a very nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
And we want to do it the right way.
We have been talking about the launch of the show for a few months and having plenty of conversations on where we wanted to start. And we both kept coming back to this pretty big shift in our lives that we've experienced privately and also publicly around our identities, gender, sexuality, who we are and who we love. And we haven't necessarily had the conversation with you all point blank. I've been on a few other podcasts where I've spoken some about this like shift we've experienced and this transition, so to speak. But you especially, like, we know we need to set the record straight, so to speak.
Well, we went from talking about it all the time, very publicly, to, talking about our baby. Like, we just kind of stopped talking about it and didn't ever really talk about the why. Like, I put out, one of those Ask Me Anything sticker questions on Instagram. It was the first time I ever did one of those. And well over half the questions, like maybe 75%, were all surrounding how has your identity shifted since becoming a parent? How do you, Nico, identify now? What's changed? What are your pronouns? Like, and I was kind of worried that maybe some of the questions would feel a little more attacking, but most of what I read, felt very curious and wanting to know and understand. And I think that we've finally come to a place where we want to share that and have like a really, you don't get to have nuanced conversations about this anymore. Like social media is like button everything up in 60 seconds or in this many characters. And this is a place where we can kind of long form really talk about what shifted for us and what has stayed the same.
Yeah. And just like given the social and political landscape these days, like a lot of this language has been really weaponized as of late.
Yeah.
And there's almost like this reclaiming in our own selves that we're experiencing in real time right now. And that's part of the reason why we're launching this podcast is we want to bring you all into our world.
Right.
And, there's something about just like the queer community in general, right? Like if you are a queer person, like you can understand how this world is interconnected and how you find this language and this terminology and who your tribes are and where everything is, right?
Yeah.
But also for people who aren't queer, like it can be really confusing, right? Like these words feel like a distant, like I have no idea what that is. So I think it's important for us to just kind of like give the chronological story of this is how we found all of this and this is where we are now.
Yes.
To really just like...
Let's just do it.
You want to get into the episode?
Nico's favorite thing is to tell you all about what is about to happen instead of just making it happen.
It works for us in our relationship quite well, I will say that.
Okay,
all right,
agreed.
let's do this shit. Let's just get into it, all right? This is
Full
of
Shift.
Nico and Bethany are full of shift.
Nico and Bethany are full of shift.
Nico and Bethany are full of shift.
Nico and Bethany are full of shift. Nico and Bethany are full of shift.
Nico and Bethany are full of shift. Nico and Bethany are full of shift. Okay, I'm a little nervous to have this conversation.
I know you are. I can feel it on you, which I think is sweet because the nerves are just because you care so much.
That's
and
true.
I think also because you've spent a lot of time, fielding and monitoring people's feelings and emotions surrounding this conversation, and you've taken in a lot of that. And so you have held a lot of responsibility, And I think today it's really like we're not going to make everyone happy. There will be certain things that are said that somebody is not pleased about, but that's okay. Like that is how conversations work sometimes,
totally.
You can't please everyone. So all we can really do is speak our truth. And this is truly our perspective and our own experience. It's not a blanket of what other people should be experiencing or have,
And
this is us.
This isn't a fixed conversation either. It's not like we're saying all this shit and that's it, end of story. Like we will be unpacking this shit for the rest of our lives. That's kind of just like how this shift works, right? And I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it on this podcast, but we're going to get into it. Let's take us back to a point in our relationship when we started exploring other parts of ourselves, right? We're going to get into an episode that is like our full story in the future, but important to note, I'm going to say that a lot on this show.
You love saying important to note.
Important to note. But we both, in like the mid-2000s started dating same sex, right? I started dating men, you started dating women. We both allowed each other a level of freedom where we could really like experiment, explore, find ourselves. It was a really beautiful time in our lives. Like some of it was messier than others.
Sure. I think prior, like 2015-ish maybe is when we really started like openly and confidently dating people of the same sex. And
which was 10 years after we met.
Yes. And prior to that, we had experiences, but they felt a little more
closeted.
Yeah. Or, drunk or like just, a little more in secret. I know. Yeah, I know that was certainly the case for me, and I think for you as well. So around 2015 is when we sort of let it out, and there was like really a level of freedom. I know I certainly felt that. I was living in New York City, and I was just like, okay, let's go. Like, what is this world? This is fun.
Yeah, and it may seem like that's not that long ago, but the language around identity was much different 10 years ago than it is today. I mean, you talk to, some kid now, right? They know all of this shit. It's just like stuff wasn't spoken on in the same ways.
No, I mean, it was even different 5 years ago.
Yeah, especially publicly, right? Especially like when you're talking about celebrity and like who was saying what. There was a lot of just closeted shit happening. Around 2017, I got sober in 2015. I guess around 2015, I got sober and I started taking myself seriously in a completely different way. I started just like exploring parts of myself that I just like couldn't because of this blanket that was over me. I'm an alcoholic and I was dealing with a bunch of shit. And once I got sober, I was like, oh, I can actually come into myself. I can step into myself. I started dating this person, this man, And I was out at a party one night in New York City, and I was having a conversation with someone who I didn't know was a reporter. And they were asking me questions about this relationship that I was in. And I said something along the lines of like, oh, I'm fluid, right? Next morning, I wake up, page 6.
Yeah.
Nico Tortorella identifies as fluid.
I totally forgot about this, by the way. I kind of forgot that this happened. It was a big deal.
I mean, I remember getting a phone call from my publicist at the time being like, code red, what the fuck? Like, this is coming out. How do we want to deal with this?
Right.
And
it's one thing for it to come out. It's another thing for it to come out without your knowing and consent and control and like, I'm sorry that happened to you.
It's okay. I mean, I was ready to have the conversation.
Yeah.
You know?
Still.
And I look back at it and I'm grateful for it, honestly. And the person that I was at that time was very much so like under the impression like, oh, I have to get ahead of this. Like if this is going to be talked about, I'm going to be the one that tells the story.
Right.
I knew very, very little about any of this language and this terminology, right? I knew that like people could be straight, people could be gay, people could be bisexual, whatever, it's all fluid. I didn't really like put too much energy into it.
Yeah.
But when this came out, I was like, I need to learn more. I'm just like such a baby gay at this point, right?
Well, and didn't you feel pressure that you needed to learn more because suddenly people were like, why are you using fluid and not bisexual? Like, I feel like people were mad about some of the language.
That happened right away. When the word fluid was used, I mean, I had thousands of DMs from different people being like, that's not a real word. You have to use the word bisexual. We have fought so long for this word. Like, you have a voice. You're standing up for a community. You have a responsibility at this point.
Right.
And it put a lot of pressure on me. And I was like, again, I'm going to get ahead of this. All right. I was having all of these conversations in my life. Like I was hanging out with a bunch of drag queens at the time and just like I was going out all the time. I was just like in the mix. And I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to start a podcast. I'm going to have these conversations with microphones and take this education publicly. Right. That's what I did. I started the Love Bomb.
And I also, sorry to interject, but I also feel like in you getting sober, like, your addiction, your new addiction, like the place where that energy was channeled was in gathering information. Yeah. Like that kind of became your new obsession was a bit of how it felt like I want to talk to everyone and know everything and like shower me and all of this.
Because I was really confused more than anything on why people had a problem with love. Really, that's what it came down to, right? Like, if somebody is in love and in light, right, in this relationship, like, why would anyone have a problem with that? I just couldn't ever wrap my head around it. And, like, that came from, like, young beliefs. I mean, I remember the first time I found out that, like, being gay was possible. I, like, saw 2 men holding hands or something on TV. And I remember going to my mom being like, why would 2 men ever why would 2 men or 2 women ever be in a relationship? Like they can't have babies, right? Like that was my very early understanding of any sort of sexuality. It was like just to procreate, right? Which I think is like interesting given now our understanding of sexuality, right? But my mom's response was like, you know, what are you talking about? Like it has nothing to do with babies. Like 2 men together, 2 women together, like that, it's not right. It's gross. And she's come a long way over the years. Like I don't mean to throw shade at my mom, right? But that was just kind of like the MO back then, right? Especially for that generation, right? And I started this podcast. You know, I just wanted to have as many conversations as I could with different people to like hear their stories, to figure out what was what, to like go through the letters in the acronym LGBTQIAPK+, the whole lot. I wanted to learn it all, right? And as I started to unpack sexuality, that was like where I was starting, right? You have to start unpacking gender, as well as race, class, and socioeconomic status. I mean, it's the whole lot. But like the education, you think you're learning one thing, but you have to learn 100 other things all at the same time, right? And then I started learning about gender identity and trans folks, and I had some trans friends at the time, and I heard non-binary for the first time, right? And I remember like coming to you about the language around there and being like, these people exist, it's a real thing. And it felt so unattainable at the time. I was like, well, that's not me. Like, I could never do that. I don't look like that person. My early understandings of gender queerness and non-binary identity, it was like, well, it's a physical attribution, right? Which isn't the case. Like a lot of that stuff can be totally invisible, which gets even more confusing. But I just found myself in this like queer spiral, right? I just had to take in as much information as I possibly could. And there's something that happens when you start unpacking gender. Like if a man isn't necessarily what we've been taught a man is, and a woman isn't necessarily what a woman is, and there's more in between, and there's intersex people, right? There are people that are born somewhere in between man and woman, and the number of those people's born is actually much higher than people realize. It's the same number as redheads, which is crazy. And it's not just external organs, it's internal stuff, it's hormone receptors.
Right.
It's just, I just took in so much information so fast, right? But it starts to break down sexuality too, right? Like the more you understand about the complexities of gender, sexuality kind of loses some of its legs to stand on. And it just got confusing. And I know it's confusing for people listening. If you know nothing about this right now, it's like, well, what the fuck are you even talking about? And that's where I was. And that's where like I still am in a lot of these conversations. And can you talk some just like about us coming to terms with identifying as non-binary and like where you were in your life at the time, having a relationship with me for so many years and starting to date women and, you know, bisexuality?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really remember all the details, but I think you kind of started using I actually feel like we started using gender fluid.
Yeah.
Maybe you did first, and then you were like, babe, you're on this same train as me. And I was like, okay, yeah, you know.
Well, fluid was the word that I used for everything because it was just this like all-encompassing thing.
So describes, full of shift. Yeah. Like we are fluid people, whether you're talking about sex, gender, or just our
way
clothes,
beyond all
my
of it.
hair.
Yeah.
But then the word non-binary felt like it was a bit interchangeable, and I sort of felt like I was being named that without me necessarily naming that, so then I was kind of echoing back that language. I do remember non-binary never sitting great with me because I didn't like the idea of non.
Right, like, the exclusionary aspect.
As a person, I so much prefer all, you know, and I think you do too. But at the time, non-binary sort of felt like, to me, it felt like leaning both into this feminine and this masculine side. And that piece felt nice.
Yeah, made sense.
And then, you know, I was exclusively dating women, but I didn't really feel comfortable with the term lesbian because of you, you know? And I mean, I've dated plenty of guys in the past, and like, for some people, you can date guys and know you're a lesbian and whatever, but that wasn't the case for me. However, I was surrounded, like my group of friends were all lesbians. Like that was the New York City crew that I was in. Great time. But labeling yourself as a bisexual was really looked down upon. Yeah. And it just felt like you weren't real or like you hadn't decided.
Looked down by everybody.
By
all of our gay and lesbian friends and everyone straight that we do, too. There's a lot of bisexual shame in the world.
Yes. And even more so for you than
for
me.
Men than for women.
Right. Or I guess it's different. I think for women, it's like a bit sexy, you know?
It's sexualized, you know? I mean, that's just like misogyny 101.
Right.
You know? Like women are allowed to be bisexual because like it's hot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't really, I felt very, very ashamed of leaning into that identity. Now, if someone asked me, I would say I am bisexual. Like that is exactly what I am, you know? But the non-binary or gender fluid, right, kind of gave me more of that validity almost. They, them pronouns made me feel more valid. Yeah. And the more that I leaned into my masculine, like I can remember feeling like I looked so femme. My hair was long and red and I was like, you know, had nails. And I remember feeling like I was too girly looking to be a lesbian or to be in that world. And so, you know, I ended up shaving my head. I grew out armpit hair, leg hair. Like I leaned into my masculine very heavily at that time. And some of it I loved, some of it was pressure, you know, to try to like fit in to a group.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of my identity, not all of it, because it wasn't fake, you know, like it was very real, but some of it was pressure. It was like a mix of different things.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Did I say that clearly?
No, totally. It's like, especially just given the people that we were surrounded with in New York City at the time and the conversations that we were having. And a lot of that came from the podcast and like this whole new group of friends that we had made. And there was this responsibility to like keep up, you know? And it was beautiful at the time. Like we both had so much fun doing it, right? There's a level of freedom in that expression that is just fucking fun. You know, like, you know, I got deep into drag culture and was hanging out with drag queens. And, you know, I mean, that's like a sensitive topic these days, but like, it was fucking fun.
Yeah.
I had fun.
And I will say, like, the idea of fluid, I don't think that is gone. That is definitely not gone for me. As much as I leaned into my masculine then, I've leaned into my feminine now.
Right.
And I imagine that masculine will come back at points in the future, right? Which actually is the definition of fluid.
Right.
Like moving between all of those. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, because of the podcast and my work as an actor, I was on a hit TV show at the time. I was on Younger. Like, I started getting all of this, like, worldly recognition for this
press
conversation. Yeah, this press. I was on the cover of multiple magazines. I was on a ton of talk shows. We were on the cover of magazines together. Like,
this is pre us being married, by the way.
Everyone wanted to talk about it because it was salacious, rebellious material at a time when people weren't talking about this shit in the same way that they are right now, right?
Yes, that's an important key. It was a very, very different conversation then than it is now.
Right. And we became famous for having these conversations.
Yeah.
It was like this weird little bubble that we lived in, but like it was very public. We were dealing with this shit privately, but then we were dealing with all of this shit very publicly.
Yes.
And we had to, you know, keep up with all of it. And there was a point after 2 seasons of my podcast, The Love Bomb, where I got a book deal. I got a 2-book deal because of all the work that I've been doing to talk about this type of shit. And my first book was a book of poetry called All of It Is You, where I really attempted to like explore this idea that we are all, every single one of us is the entirety of the universe. We are all mirrors of each other and everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. This idea of fluidity, like we are all of it, right? All of it is you. Yeah. And there's something that happened with the pronouns in me unlocking this like secret of the universe that really made sense. Like they, them was all of it and still is in a lot of ways.
Yes. They, them pronouns, especially then, not being as widely used. Not that they weren't used. Like, let's be real.
No, yeah, we didn't invent they, them pronouns. No.
No, we invented it.
Yeah.
No, it's just a different conversation now. Like, people, know like Trump is talking about pronouns or something. Like, no one knew exactly what that meant at that time.
Right.
So the they, them language felt, I think, artistic to both of us. Creative. In so many ways. Yeah. Like, it was, here's this type of language that can encompass this idea that we have this masculine side and this feminine side. Like, in many ways, it felt spiritual when we were talking about it, the two of us. Where it stopped feeling that way is when it was like constantly fighting. Yeah. Like, it felt like I would have to be here's an example. Like, I would go out, okay? And someone would introduce me. I'm like, well, Bethany uses they, them pronouns. And then the person would be like, oh, and they'd be like, she, whatever. Because I looked very femme. Right. And then, they would have to say, oh, no, it's they. And then, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Right. And then they're apologizing. I'm like, babe, I'm just like trying to get a drink and have a conversation with you and talk. Yeah. It started to like get in the way of my connections with people.
Right.
And not everyone feels that way. That was how I felt. And then talking about press, go ahead. Like how articles would be written.
Well, yeah, it was never easy. There was never like we made the decision together. Like, okay, this is who we are now. Like we have always been non-binary to a certain degree. It was so much more than our gender. It really encompassed like everything that ever was for us. It was poetic in nature, always. And we made the decision to like claim this language publicly. I mean, I remember I was in a car with my publicist and I was doing all this press and I had my agents on the phone and I was like, listen, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to start using these words. No, nobody understood what I was talking about. And I was trying to explain it in a way that was poetic is the word that I just like keep going to. It was just more. And like, if you don't understand, going back to this like gender sex 101, like if you don't understand any of this, yes, it can feel really silly, right? And that's the response that I got back. And then we were doing all this press, and even like in articles that were written, they would say, Nico and Bethany are non-binary. He did this, she did this. Then they would throw in a they, and it was just fucking messy.
I also loved the idea of they, them pronouns in the sense that I felt like it took away stigma. Right? So like with the Become Project, when we would talk about a client before we knew their pronouns, we would always use they, them just to like remove any stigma of like, oh, this is a man and that's the reason they're saying this. Right. Or this is like, well, like I loved the idea that I felt like it put people on a neutral playing field.
Yeah.
But again, that's not really what it is today.
Right. And this was all before we decided to get married. So then we started talking about being polyamorous, having an open relationship all at the same. And we had like 17 different coming outs of sorts, right? It was like first you were fluid, then you were bisexual, then you were pansexual. Now we're non-binary, now we're genderqueer. Well, fuck it, we're polyamorous too. Like we
know what we are? Full of shift.
Full of fucking shift. No, it's true. But like that became a huge talking point for us too, because we weren't married. We have always been each other's person, right? They were like...
Well, we got married, and I think we were both terrified of the fact that we were in this union with one another. It's like man and woman in a union, like publicly. Right. And I think also being poly and open was like, but we still have these other things. And we're going to talk about our relationship and the polyamory of it all and the openness of it all. I think that's too much to try to jam into this conversation.
Yeah, but just like, top level information. We weren't even living together when we got married. You had a girlfriend, I had a boyfriend. We both went and like did some ayahuasca, came back, decided we were going to get married after an incredibly like traumatic and beautiful couple weeks in the jungle. And we got married for a multitude of reasons, but like in dating other people, everyone always knew how important we were to each other, right? And it was confusing for other people. It was confusing for us. At the end of the day, we were always each other's emergency contacts, right? And it kind of like made sense to us, like, okay, if we get married, we're going to establish that we are the primary relationship and it will leave room for other relationships, right?
Right.
So we got married, okay? And pretty soon after that, COVID hits.
Yeah.
And that really changed everything.
COVID rocked everyone's worlds, ours included.
Yeah. I mean, the world fell apart.
Yeah.
In so many ways. Like, we had a house upstate New York.
We were living in the city.
We
had a place upstate.
We got a place upstate.
And we went there.
COVID hits. We go upstate. And for the first time in really our whole relationship, like, we were forced to spend all of our time together.
Don't make it sound so great.
But in a way that we had never experienced.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Like, we have spent so much time kind of like intersecting in the past and like coming in and out of each other's lives. And that's how we always imagined our marriage would be, I think, when we decided to get married. And all of a sudden, here we are living in this house. The whole world feels like unattainable. And
it also, the environment shift, right? I feel like it went from like external to internal. And by that, I mean like in New York City, our relationship, it was talked about, it was photographed. We were out, we were in the outfits, we were doing the thing, red carpet, camera facing.
Right.
Then we went upstate to a completely different environment. 40 acres, not one person around. You can go out in the front yard naked and nobody's going to see you. Started gardening. It was just me and you. We were in New York. So, yeah, just can't breathe. We're going to have to get bigger chairs.
For anyone that can't see right now, Bethany Meyers is very pregnant. We are in our 31st week right now.
30.
We're in our 31st week.
No, we're in the 30th week. On Saturday, it's the 31st week.
Which means we're in our 31st week. We've passed 30 weeks. We're in our 31st week.
No, that's actually not how it works, Mr. Confident.
I'm Korean, okay? This is my new shift. I'm just kidding, actually. Don't take that seriously, y'all.
We got to cut that.
No, I think fucking leave it.
Okay, but we were, I forgot what I was saying. Whatever. We were upstate.
Obviously, the whole world was falling
just
apart.
You and I. Yeah, yes. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to see. Like, New York was on full lockdown, and it was just you and me. And we do great together.
It was amazing. Yeah.
It was
for us, it was beautiful. It was the best thing that probably could have ever happened for our relationship. Mm-hmm. I think COVID, like, really, you either like got divorced or started making babies, right? And we decided
start making babies.
The second, this was. I mean, we've talked about having kids our whole lives, knowing each other.
Yes.
And here we were in this house, and it was like we were hitting a certain age. We're like, all right, we're gonna grow a family. It's time.
Right. Which was really, at the end of the day, us getting married, I think, was primarily two things. One, we wanted to establish that relationship so other partners would understand where you and I stood with each other.
Right.
And the other was because we wanted to have a family, and that union was important to us.
Right. And we've always been madly in love with each other. I just want to throw that in there. But no, we've always been each other's partner.
Yeah.
And we were convinced the second we decided we were going to start to try to get pregnant, it was going to happen automatically. No question about it. I mean, we've been having sex for 15 years at that point, right? But everything always kind of came to us. And it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't happen right away. Not the first time, not the second time, not the third time. And it starts, anyone who's experiencing any sort of, or has experienced any sort of infertility, it's really fucking hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. And it was right around this time where we both, me first, I decided I needed to get off social media. I needed to take a break from the noise. I was like, also, there was a revolution that happened in the country, right? Shit was on fire, quite literally, right? And I, in becoming a father energetically, I was like, I need to protect our space some. I need to turn off the noise.
Right.
And
it wasn't, I feel like people, can hear that and feel like it was shying away, running away, not what it wasn't that. It was, in my opinion, because I also pulled back a lot, it was really a protection of internal space and mental health and, personal peace in so many ways.
Yeah. There was also a point during COVID where I had done a celebrity drag race episode the year prior, and it came out during COVID. And I was talking a lot about gender and non-binary identity and trans folks, and I was raising money for, the Trans Law Center and whatever. That episode came out, and all of a sudden, all these trans women online started coming for me so hard. Right. I just got a slew of pretty intense, nasty comments from people about what I was saying and how I was tearing people down rather than lifting people up, and how dare I try to have these conversations given who I am and what I look like. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Every step of the way of us having these conversations publicly, there was someone waiting to tell us we were doing it wrong, that we were not valid. I mean, I remember when we were on the cover of The Advocate, it was you and me naked, in an embrace. We've been naked a lot in some photo shoots, but the cover of the magazine, the headline was, "Yes, this is what a queer family looks like." And overnight, that came out. every queer person from, here to fucking Oregon was like, that's ridiculous. This is not a queer, you put a white man and a white woman on a cover and this is a queer family. Like, it was just the gatekeeping that happens everywhere in the world, but like specifically in the LGBTQ community is really, really intense. And it really started tearing me up.
Yes, it definitely did. And
specifically that Drag Race episode really destroyed me.
Yeah, I forgot that the timing of that.
Yeah.
To what a lot of people don't understand about having a platform and being someone who chooses to talk about, current events, political things, the hot topics, is really how much incoming you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And you have to be at a place in your life where you can take that in, or you can find a way to navigate it, because it will break you all the way down.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was really going through depressive episodes and dealing with depression and anxiety, it was when I was the most active online. And it was a lot of work with my therapist to be like, how can you pull back from this? And the more I've pulled back and the more that I've, really made a lot of what I talk about on Instagram very happy, compassionate, the better that I feel.
Yeah.
And it's important. If I want to actually make a difference in this world and to help my community and to be part of it, I have to be good myself.
Right.
We have to be good ourselves,
Right.
So the people who can do it, like, more power to you,
Right.
but not everyone can actually do it. And I think that that's important to remember, because I've gotten plenty of people that are like, well, you don't talk about this anymore. Why don't you say this? And I can't believe your silence is deafening on X issue.
Right.
And I'm like, I hear you, and I know that you want that, and it would support you in a way.
Yeah.
But like, I can't give everything. I still have to be okay.
Right. And I mean, it's not to say that all of the comments that we got at that time were like negative. I mean, there was like so much beautiful shit that was happening online too, and that really was the driving force for so much of the work that I was doing at the time. Like, I know it can seem really like self-obsessed and narcissistic, and I was talking about all of this because, I was trying to position myself into a different place in the world or in my career. But like, from the bottom of my heart, so much of what I was talking about was like for other people.
Yeah.
Like I say it all the time. It was like, for the kid that like wasn't safe to have this conversation, like there were no actors when I was growing up that were talking about any of this shit. Like, would it have made my life easier? Would it have like answered some of the questions that I had as a kid if I had seen some sort of role model? Even just like having a little bit of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not to say I'm the first one that ever had these conversations, but like in Hollywood, there weren't many people who looked like me that were having these conversations at the time. There are now. It's a totally different world.
Yeah.
But like, there was a responsibility to that, right? And I loved that responsibility at the time. I mean, my second book, Space Between, was basically like an entire memoir about me unpacking different layers and levels of my own identity in terms of sexuality and gender. Like, that was, I mean, the book was about us and our relationship, but like, that was the B storyline, right? And I was so proud of the work that I was putting out in the world. And the people that had nasty shit to say, like, if there was one bad comment in 1,000, that's the one you remember. And
absolutely.
That's hard.
I can remember bad comments from years ago.
Yeah.
It's why, like, I think you've always had a bit of an easier time brushing things off. Like, I think in the way that you were raised, that was a little bit of like your family culture. It was like, fuck these assholes, what do they know? For me, being raised in a religious setting, it was very much like, I have to please all the people around me and like be a good girl,
Yeah.
And so dealing with any type of comment still to this day is really challenging for me.
Yeah.
But you definitely did hit a breaking point.
Yeah.
I think the episode you're talking about, COVID, and our struggle to conceive.
Yeah.
It was a multi-layered piece that was like, so infertility happened.
Wait, hold on. I want to say one more thing about this before we get into infertility. privilege is a part of this conversation that I just want to like touch on for a second. Like it may seem like, oh my God, your life was so hard. Somebody was saying something mean to you online. Like, it can be really fucking ridiculous. I understand that. There was something happened that when we went to Indonesia, we went on a trip to Indonesia.
Yeah.
We were going to go and we were going to like talk to different people. We're going to be on different panels about sexuality. And we got flown out there, and it was like a whole experience of a couple weeks in Indonesia. And we got to this first panel, and these, young people.
Well, we got to this panel and we're ready to talk about they, them pronouns and labeling people correctly. And we're going to give our whole
freedom and love
gender spiel that we give in the US all the time. And I mean, the first question was like, I'm gay and I'm scared I'm going to get arrested when I go out to a bar.
Or I'm going to get murdered.
Yeah.
And
we were
like... It was like one of those things where, we had always known that it was easier here than other places. And it can also be really violent here in the United States. But like, when you're face to face with someone that is still fighting for their life, right? It really just put shit into perspective. And it really made us both be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, maybe
the conversations we're having are very privileged.
Yeah, very, very privileged. And maybe we're thinking about this in ways that could potentially be harmful. So the privilege thing is important. I just want to note that, like, it takes a level of privilege to even consider these conversations, right? And it, like, COVID really checked us there. Because it like kind of leveled the playing field. All of a sudden we're all experiencing the same thing at the same time. Then we started trying to make babies, and infertility really changed the game for us.
So I felt like I was always very in touch with my womb. Like, I loved to talk about periods, and I journaled and tracked my cycles for years. So in that sense, I was in touch, but I was not in touch with my feminine self. Not that you have to be in touch with your feminine self to get pregnant. Let's not get that twisted, right? But there was like a piece of my own biology that I wasn't in touch with. I know that you felt similarly. We, we'll tell more of the fertility story, but we did start going to a fertility clinic, and we were really, really face to face with our sex.
Yeah,
right?
Our biologies.
Going back to our 101 from earlier. The biology, the sex of...
We were forced to examine our bodies in a way that we had never even considered, you know? Like... It was intense. Like, your body was being like poked and prodded and under a microscope. I had to start, jerking off into cups and getting my shit tested. Like, we were determined to find a reason why we weren't getting pregnant. And we couldn't find anything, right? Which was like even more confusing. But we just had to be, we were forced to stare at our bodies in a way that we had never been before. And it started to like unlock some things, right? And this is like one piece of the story of how we got to where we are right now with how we identify and how language has potentially shifted in our own house. But like, we, in attempting to get pregnant, like, we were also attempting to create a mother and a father in our house. And you had to really intensely step into your feminine, and I had to really intensely step into my masculine. And that's not for everyone. That's not the only way you get pregnant, but that's what happened in our house in very, very, very real ways.
Yeah. And, so I'm a person that, like, what I speak about is very much what's happening in my life. Like, I wear it on my sleeve.
Right.
So when I was talking about all of our gender, sexuality, pronouns, polyamory, open relationships, all of that, everybody was, when I say everybody, like, brands were all in, you know, like getting brand deals, sponsorships. And some of it felt kind of weird,
I mean, this was the time when like the pink washing of brands around Pride really started to explode. Like Pride 2017, 2018 became this fucking massive event every year, right? And there was so much money circulating around the queer community at that time.
I remember like a luggage company being like, hey, we want to do like a post with you on this luggage. I'm like, great, love your luggage, sounds good. They're like, okay, so for the post, we want you to tell us how this luggage has like shifted your identity. And I'm like, what? Like, what does this bag have to do with my queerness, you know?
It's on wheels, it's moving forward, but you can also move it back, and like you can open it up and pack shit in. There's a gay joke in there somewhere.
It was just like, ew, you know, like there was something that I turned down because it didn't feel right. I like pushed back on a lot of these things. They wanted these really heartfelt, sentimental posts, which I was known for, but about a product. And okay, so there was that. Then when infertility took over my life, like
our life,
and just from my own perspective, like it consumed me. It was one of the hardest points in my life. Like it was it was really tough. God bless anybody out there that's going through it right now. My heart goes out to you. But I wanted to talk about it, you know, like Instagram, posting about these things was such an outlet for me. And when I started posting about this non-sexy topic, shit dropped. Really, really dropped.
Similarly, in the ways that like posting about or even just talking about sexuality and gender when we were at the time, it was like it was a new thing that was happening in the world. When we started talking about infertility, it's different now, but like nobody was talking about it. There are these unwritten rules around infertility that you just don't share these stories publicly.
I think there was a community talking about it, but it was not the community that we were in.
No, correct.
Because there is a big community that talks about it, but it's like its own, it's a group, you know?
It was almost opposite of the community that we were attached to at the time.
Yes, because it also, you know, that's like, felt like a binary conversation. It's just, you know, so.
Because all of a sudden, from an optics standpoint, you were a woman, I was a man, we were trying to make a baby.
Yes.
We were the most heteronormative couple that had ever existed. On paper, that's what it looked like.
Yes.
Behind closed doors, we were still us.
Right.
We still had everything we had experienced in the last how many years. Like, that doesn't change.
Right.
We still are these people in so many ways, right?
Yeah. And it was, I mean, I remember there was like a brand that I worked closely with, you know, year one working with them, non-binary identity. I was all over the place.
Yeah.
Year two working with them, talking about infertility, that being part of my story, even hair getting a little longer, looking more feminine. I was suddenly not anywhere. And it felt really, like, it just felt really gross to me. And it was the first time, I feel emotional suddenly. It was like the first time where I was like, oh, I'm your token.
Yeah.
I'm
a
like,
chess piece here.
Yeah, you don't actually care about me. Like, you just want to be able to check that box.
Right.
And the checking of the box just, I mean, felt so gross to me. That made me actually feel, I think, a little bit rebellious, where I was like, I need to not talk about this because I don't want to be that check box for people.
Yeah. Whether or not we ever planned on being the poster kids for any of this stuff, right? Like, if you would have asked me, if this is where I thought our lives would have gone, I would have laughed at you. It just, it kind of happened. It was the thing that people wanted to talk about, right? And when all of a sudden we were moving in a different direction, when we wanted to talk about something else, people looked at us differently.
Yeah.
You know? And like, look, I'm an actor, right? Like, I just kind of want to throw this in here at this point, right?
I'm an actor.
But like, it's my job to play other people, right? And like, I've always taken my work really seriously, and like my ability to transform and bend and shift, right? And I have always, ever since I was a kid, I've always known that like the more that I can experience in my own world, the more energy I can step into, the more that I can play with, the more I'll be able to bring to my work. Right? Like, there was something about gender and sexuality that like allowed me to grow as a person first, but also as an actor. And like, I know it can seem like I was potentially, or it can even sound like I was an actor playing a role as a non-binary person for so many years, or as a queer person. And now all of a sudden I'm like a dad and I'm playing this like cis het role, and like it's totally opposite from where I was a few years ago. But like both of those things can exist at the same time. Like we are all constantly playing roles in our lives, and we are all shifting all of the fucking time. Like you can be this one year, be this another year. That doesn't mean the person that I was last year still doesn't exist in the body that you have. Like it has always been part of my goal in life to like play with as much as I can. And I think it's just like important to note. Like I know it can feel like or we, you know, like we're using this language and these identifiers to like propel our own careers, our own stories. And now it can feel like we are traitors and we're leaving all that shit behind. But like, it's just not the truth.
Yeah.
And I know that's a confusing thing to wrap your head around, but.
Well, I think, you know, it goes back to the idea that people really don't want you to be fluid.
Right.
People are, you know, fixed is much easier for people to understand, especially in today's world with the way that we receive information.
Right.
People are supposed to be brands, not humans, you know, and humans they shift, they change, they evolve with the human experience. Like, it's much easier for people to be like, okay, you're this, you're in that box, and check, done.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm sure that's a big part of it. But yes, what you're saying is spot on.
Yeah, and like especially in the queer community, right? Like there is an expectation, like if you're gonna pick one letter or pick one label, that's who you have to be for the rest of your life. And that is just like simply not true. Like
it's not true, and it's not actually what people are experiencing, but it's the conversation that's being had. But when I sit down and have conversations with people, like they get it.
There's
you
more,
know?
yeah.
Yeah, there's so much more.
But everyone wants the ability to put someone in a box, right? And to like put a little bow on it. This is who you are. This is what you represent. This is what you stand for. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But like, there's so much more to everybody than all of that. And like, I know it can seem like, especially in the past, that as we were having these conversations, this is all we were as people. This was always just one little piece of our story. Always. An important one, right? But it was never everything.
Okay, I think we're repeating now.
Okay.
So then
we get pregnant.
Yeah. Okay, let's go there. Because once we got pregnant, then the brand conversation, not brands, but like articles, and like, I feel like everyone wanted to know how we were going to raise our kid.
Right. There was this expectation like, oh, Nico and Bethany, these like queer icons are 100% going to raise their kids free of gender. And we talked about it, right? It was definitely like
there was a time when I
discussion.
thought that too, and I was like, "Whoa, how am I going to raise like a?"
There was something exciting about it too,
baby,
right? Like there was potential to try something new in the world. And given the 2 years of us trying to get pregnant and everything that we had, you know, continued to unpack in our own lives, we came to this conclusion that like, it's not the right time in the world for us to raise kids free of gender. Is there some future time where there's this like perfect utopia of neutrality and singularity where we are all equal and race doesn't exist and gender doesn't exist and we can all be seen as like the same type of person? Sure, potentially. But like, we can't even agree on race as a people right now. Like there are still so many wars being fought all over the world for race and religion, like stuff that you can see. Like a lot of this stuff that we're talking about can be an invisible conversation. Like we're just not ready for this.
Well, I felt very much like, you know, I struggle a little bit with this conversation because I don't think I have quite all of the language to fully satisfy or describe, and I'm not a childhood development expert by any stretch of the imagination. But we will teach our kids the difference of sex, gender, and expression, and lay that out in age-appropriate ways as they grow. And that's really important to us for obvious reasons. But I don't feel the need to, tell my kids that they cannot claim a gender until they're old enough to do so.
Yeah,
or
I
need to make them something neutral until they can tell me what they want. I think that I can, use the gender pronouns of their biological sex. And if one day they want to change that, then okay, we'll have that conversation
and
then.
It'll be a full family conversation.
Full family combo.
Again, it will be an age-appropriate conversation, and there will be a lot to consider, right? It's not going to be an overnight, okay, we're good. There's a lot to unpack there.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I feel like the idea, for us anyway, as parents, almost felt like politicizing my kid, and not allowing them identity, which I think when you're really young, that is how you take in the world.
Right.
That's how you see the world.
Mm-hmm.
It helps, whatever. So, it, for her own sake, that felt important. And I know what we endured, right? Just in
a few years.
In a few years and during that time. And not even when it was as much of a divisive conversation as it is now.
It's more divisive now than it was when we were having these conversations.
So to put that on my child and in group settings just didn't feel right to me. And I know that there are people who do it, and I'm positive there are people who do it great, and all power to you. Wasn't something that I wanted to step into, and it didn't feel fair to her.
There's something that happens when you become a parent where you become a new person overnight, right? We have just changed in so many ways since becoming parents, but our sole responsibility is to protect our children and protect our family. Right. And this is part of that, right? There's a level, especially when the kids are young, of shielding them from the trauma of the world. And there's still a lot of trauma in these identity conversations right now. I mean, if you look at what's happening in sports and just the way the country is divided, it's just messy. And kids don't need to be part of that right now. Is there a time when it will be better? I don't know, hopefully, and for all the people that are out there doing the work to make sure that it will be better one day, power to you. Keep doing it. We need you to, right? But we're different people. And that's part of this first episode that we felt was just really important to set the foundation for this show. These last few years of us becoming parents have changed everything about who we are as individuals and as a couple. And, how we started this episode, it's no secret that we were not having these same conversations publicly. It's because we're not even having these same conversations privately. All we talk about all the time is our daughter's not sleeping right now,
Stop.
Did she poop today? Or are we gonna have to feed her? We're just in
Are we gonna have to feed her?
We're just in a completely different place in our lives. And I know that that's confusing for people, but this is our truth and we stand by it wholeheartedly.
Well, that's really the key is, our truth doesn't necessarily mean it's everyone else's truth, and everybody has different ways they experience. But that is where we are, and it's beautiful. And honestly, we're happy. And
so happy.
You said this early on in a way about I don't understand how people can fight who you love. I don't understand how people can fight happiness.
Yeah.
And we're happy. We're living in our truth. We're raising our family. We have another one on the way. I do think that there's so much about, this very sweet, delicate, early parenthood time that we're in, where for both of us, we really wanted to create this cocoon of peace. And probably because it was so much turmoil kind of getting pregnant and the way that we got there, I so strongly just felt I need it to be soft and cozy inside.
Yeah.
I need to do as much as in my power to create that space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously you can't just turn off everything, but even right now, I'm in 3rd trimester of this pregnancy, and I don't want the news playing in the house.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to listen to the news, I'm like, can you please put it on your headphones? Because I don't want to be exposed.
Yeah.
I feel, very delicate.
Yeah. Like a mom.
Like a mama,
Yeah.
And there are, I was listening to a podcast this morning about the Navajo culture, and I believe it's Navajo. I feel pretty certain about that. But they don't let, like, it's a really big thing. Like, pregnant women cannot see anything bad or dangerous, or like, you can't go to a funeral when you're pregnant. You're supposed to, like, really have on these kind
Protect
of rose
the energy. Yeah.
right? Because it's not just you. And that's yeah.
Yeah.
Which also makes me nervous to even do this podcast right now.
Right.
I'm excited to do this, but
Right.
I'm also nervous to do it because I'm like, am I opening myself back up? My goal and my hope is that this time I can take it in differently, and you will also play role of protector for me of some of the, whatever negative shit we get in.
Let's do a little communal protection right now. For everyone that's listening for a second, let's just direct a little energy towards Bethany and this baby that she's growing in her belly right now. And just like send beautiful, healthy wishes for full-term, healthy birth, and everything goes smooth, and just some love.
Peaceful postpartum.
Peaceful postpartum, yeah. And if any of y'all are experiencing it, you can get in on some of this energy too right now. There's something that happened specifically in the pronoun conversation too. I use he, him pronouns at this point. You use she, her pronouns. Not to say that we're like opposed to they, them pronouns. I'm kind of like, I just like really don't care about it in the same ways that I did back in the day. Call me whatever you want. Just make sure you call me type of thing. But
I still don't mind they. Myself.
I don't mind. I truly don't care.
Yeah.
Like, truly don't care. I feel like a man more than I ever have in my entire life right now, And like, I fucking stand by that. It's such a great feeling. It's not to say that I won't feel more fluid in the future, right? Like, I could still fucking sass out from time to time. But I'm like in my truth right now, and it's real. But there's something that happened in our infertility where like we were just like experiencing roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And the pronoun conversation was this like unnecessary roadblock that we were continuing to just like face head on. And like, I just had to let it go. I just had to move on. There was like too much coming at us at once.
Yeah.
And that was part of just the like release. There's so much release that needs to happen to create life.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like there's just been a shedding of ourselves, a shedding of the labels, of the names, of the fame, of the, I mean, we left New York City and moved to like a teeny tiny town in Florida. Like, I don't even know where we're living. I'd never heard of it before. People are like, how did you choose? I'm not going to say our city, but like, how did you choose there? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like, we're just here. And I love it. Like, there's been a shedding is really the only way that I know how to describe it. That's been
shift.
A shift. Yeah. That's been really beautiful. And again, to the public eye who's known us for a long time can probably feel confusing, a little confusing for ourselves, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I am so excited to talk about that piece and to see where the new direction takes us.
Yeah.
Because that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, we are different people since having our first daughter, Kilmer Dove, right? Like a few months after she was born, we had made the decision to pack up our houses. We had 2 houses, one in New York, one in New Jersey at the time, and like sell everything, pack up a trailer and some suitcases and move down to Florida. I mean, if you would have asked us if we were going to be moving to Florida before we had Kilmer, we would have fucking laughed at you, right?
Even when we first had her, I would have laughed. I was like, this is the home we're raising her.
Yeah.
Like,
No, but shift happens, like it's real. And
we had a third person manifesting for our family.
Kilmer Dove.
Yes.
Yeah. And now a fourth person.
And a fourth person.
Yeah.
Who we conceived the day we got here.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's why we're making this show, is like to allow ourselves the freedom to shift in real time.
And I think to also, I don't know if empower is the right word, but we're not the only people who feel this way.
Definitely not.
There are plenty of other people who want to make a change, or these feelings exist. I think there's so many layers to this
Way
episode
beyond
and what we
everything
talked
that
about.
we're talking about. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's about embracing.
And celebrating, right? Like, it's beautiful. I love you so much.
I love you so much.
Okay, why don't we break this up a little bit? Let's play a game.
We need to lighten the mood.
We need to lighten the mood. Listen, that was probably the most serious episode. No, I'm sure we'll have actually way more serious episodes than that. But this is not the tone of the show all the time. This show is going to constantly shift. We're going to do all sorts of crazy
I was going to say, I don't think
Yeah.
that there's going to be one tone.
Yeah.
But I am happy that we got to have this conversation.
We needed to.
And we wanted to.
Yeah. And I'm sure we left some shift out, right? Like,
Oh, I'm sure we'll hear about it.
yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah. Someone will come for us for sure. No.
Let's play a game.
Let's play a game. Okay, let's do some Would You Rathers.
Never have I ever.
No.
Oh, no, would you rather?
Never
Okay.
have I evers. Never have I ever done a full podcast about gender and sexuality.
You've done.
I've done hundreds. Literally hundreds. Okay, you want to go first or you want me to go first? This is full of shift.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question
Okay,
first. Would you rather have a head the size of a tennis ball or the size of a watermelon?
A watermelon?
You do have the head the size of a watermelon.
I have a small head.
I meant like...
Rude, babe. I don't need an explanation. Would you rather have to fight an angry chicken every time you get into a car or fight an angry orangutan once a year, but you get a sword?
Oh, an orangutan once a year with a sword.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Or a chicken every time you get into a car?
Every time I get into a car?
All right, yeah. I mean, you're not wrong.
Just for the record, I would never hurt an orangutan with a sword.
Okay, if you had to.
That's the one I'm worried about people coming.
If you
at
had
me
to.
for.
You would?
Who came up with this question?
Next question.
Would you rather... I have not read these yet. Would you rather walk in on your parents having sex or have them walk in on you?
Walk in on me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my mom has walked in on me having sex before.
My mom has.
In high school.
That was the first time she found out I had sex.
Definitely.
It was not good.
Would you rather have sex with the lights on or off for the rest of your life?
Off?
Okay.
My first instinct was on, though.
Mine's on, for sure.
Yeah, maybe on.
Yeah. Go.
Would you rather live in a world where it always rains meatballs or where it's always windy with flying fish?
Meatballs all day. Not even a question.
We need to ask these to my nieces. They would like that question.
Would you rather have a perpetual itch that you can never scratch or always have to sneeze, but you're never able to do it?
Oh, no. Sneeze.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Itchy, I'd go crazy.
You would. You'd go crazy with both. Who wouldn't go crazy with either one of
Yeah,
us?
agreed. Okay. Would you rather have to sleep hanging upside down like a bat or only be able to sleep standing up?
Standing up, for sure.
Upside down could be kind of fun.
Would you rather have to wear a clown nose every day for a year or wear flippers on your feet for a year?
Clown nose.
Okay, yeah.
Make the whole world smile.
Totally.
Okay, would you rather have a one-night stand with your celebrity crush or an unforgettable night with your partner?
I've had plenty of one-night stands with my celebrity crushes, and I have had plenty of unforgettable nights with my significant other. So I am going to choose you, babe.
Aw, babe.
Would you rather have a third arm growing out of your chest or a second head on your shoulder?
Third arm.
Yeah, second head would be weird. Would it be your head or would it be somebody else's head?
I have no idea, but a third arm with another baby on the way sounds great. Oh my God. Like, hold the diaper bag.
Let's do a couple more.
Okay. Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Would you rather have to sing every word you say or dance every time you move? These are both actually fun options.
I think dance every time I move.
Really?
Yeah.
I kind of thought you'd say sing.
That was my first thought.
We sing a lot of our words.
We sing a lot of our words. Would you rather have a partner who is bad at kissing but great in bed, or a partner who is a great kisser but bad in bed?
Bad kisser, good in bed.
Yeah, for sure. It's like your dream.
I don't know why. I'm just not much of a kisser.
Bethany Meyers. We'll say it here first. Not that much of a kisser.
Oh.
It's okay. I love you.
I love you too.
All right, ask me one more.
One more?
Yeah.
I started though, didn't I?
Okay, one more.
Okay. Would you rather be covered in scales like a fish or covered in fur like a bear?
Fur, for sure. I'm not too far off, let's be honest. Okay, last one. Would you rather have to say everything on your mind or never speak again?
Everything on my mind, baby.
That's pretty much what we're doing. Welcome to Full of Shift. Y'all, thank you for joining us for this first episode. My name is Nico Tortorella.
And I'm Bethany C. Meyers.
Go follow us on our socials. My Instagram is at Nico Tortorella.
At Bethany C. Meyers.
We have a new Patreon account, Full of Shift on Patreon. We're going to have some extended episodes, some bonus episodes. There'll be some other fun content over there. Yep. There's going to be community boards where y'all can come on, talk with each other, talk with us, ask us questions, do all sorts of fun stuff. Go check out our Patreon and come back next week.
We have great stories coming up.
We've got fucking epic stories.
It's going to be good.
This is
Full of Shift.
All right, get the fuck out of here. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Love you.